Adi, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. You have got an amazing background working with Michael Page in the senior finance industry. You've worked with Nestle. You are now helping job seekers. I mean, what aren't you good at? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Trisha, for having me. It's a pleasure.
You are most welcome. I would absolutely love to hear a little bit about you, in terms of your background, where you've come from, so that people can understand how best that you're going to be answering a couple of these questions, because I think that the market, there's so much dynamics happening at the minute. There's a lot to unpack.
For sure. Great. So I'm originally Indian, but I studied finance in Dubai, but I kind of knew that I didn't want to stay within finance. So still want to use my career, my degree. So started my career with Michael Page within the finance and accounting recruitment team. And I was recruiting within the senior finance market. After which I realized that a piece of the puzzle was still missing for me, which is why I wanted to move in-house. So I started recruiting at Nestle and I was promoted there twice within about 2.5 years. And I was recruiting for Middle East and North Africa across all levels, across all functions. And at a very young age, I got exposure to like a lot of really senior candidates and hiring managers. So I was even recruiting and working with the CFO, which was scary, but an amazing experience. And when I finally moved to America, I started career coaching because after reviewing about 100,000 CVs and interviewing more than 1,000 people, I just saw that there were a lot of really common things that people were going wrong in. And I thought that having actual experience, I could share that with people.
Fantastic. What an amazing background. So you're certainly perhaps a global citizen, as we could say. It's an amazing experience to have. So I would love your insights. Perhaps we could come to, I guess, the different market dynamics, but specifically if we could come back to maybe the financial world, what type of skill sets is required if someone was perhaps transitioning from someone that, they weren't originally in finance and now they would love the industry because there's a lot of fintech happening. There's a lot of, sort of new blockchain away from your traditional finance, but they're wanting to get into that world. What would you recommend someone do to be able to be successful?
Sure, sure. So I actually do know somebody who successfully transitioned into finance, and I hired her into Nestle, and she was previously within marketing, and then she knew that she wanted to be in finance. So she honestly taught herself a lot of the skills on LinkedIn. So the skills I would say that were the most important for her were SQL, Power BI, and Tableau. And I would say that it was honestly a benefit for her because she came from a non-finance background, because she could talk finance to non-finance people. Because at the end of the day, why do finance people do things, right? To be able to explain it to the larger audience, to the larger organization, so that they can use those insights to make decisions.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, good. I think it's important that you sort of upskill with the industry requirements and having a look at various job descriptions, seeing what the common theme is. Is there any sort of gaps that you're missing? And then perhaps go ahead and complete short courses or some LinkedIn learning or whatever caliber of course that you're able.
And
Yeah.
I'd say that it's also quite helpful to get a certification just to make yourself a more credible person within finance.
Yep, agree.
So
Absolutely.
getting like
Invest.
a
Yeah.
CIMA or a CFA or ACCA, very, very helpful.
100%, because I think the talent pools are quite big, especially within the UAE region, that if you don't have that, it could be a reason that the box is, not ticked to your. Yeah. Cool.
And also I would say that getting even 1 year of Big Four experience is amazing, because when I was at Michael Page, a lot of the industry leaders that I was talking with would always say, we need somebody with Big Four experience. No matter how much we try to bargain with them, they would not budge. And the reason that they would say that was because if you work at Big Four, you have experience across a lot of different industries, a lot of different companies. So if you've just worked for one company, you can't really show that. But if you worked in PwC, for example, maybe you audited a bank, you audited a holding company or a finance company like Binance, for example.
Yep. Yeah. Perfect. Good. Amazing. I love this advice. So you've recruited within the UAE or Dubai region. You've now moved to the US. I would love to hear a little bit of insights in terms of what are you seeing in the market at the minute?
In the US?
Well, I guess in general, and
Sure.
yeah.
Um, I would say that it's kind of a similar dynamic where a lot of layoffs and restructuring is happening. And right now, when companies are recruiting talent, they want them to tick all of the boxes, because currently it's what the companies want. And there's so many candidates in the market. And especially, I think in Dubai, following Expo, so many people wanted to move there. So there's like just such a high supply of candidates, and hiring managers are being so picky, as if they weren't already picky before. Now it's become tenfold.
Absolutely. So from a candidate experience, what can one do? So I know that, for example, the CV, yes, it's a great document, but you need to think beyond the
Yeah.
resume now. So
At
what
this
some
point, you definitely need to think beyond the resume. I would say that also being really active on LinkedIn and having a brand is so important. So when I worked at Nestle, there was one guy, he was actually in Saudi, and he used to post so many things about trade marketing, just the work that he was doing, about like the activations that he was having. And I always had his profile in mind. And I was like, whenever I have a trade marketing manager role, he's going to be the first guy that I go to. Um, Obviously going to like a lot of industry forums, etc. That's so important. And beyond that, yeah, just networking. I'm not going to say that like your resume is not important, because it is, because once you make that connection on LinkedIn, you start talking with them, you comment on people's posts, they comment on yours, and you say, hey, I'm interested in working for your company. The first thing they're going to say is, great, send over your resume and I'll send it to the recruiter. You can't just have like a really poor resume, and that just
that's
doesn't
right.
work, right?
That's
And for
right.
that, you also need to have a really appealing LinkedIn, because if you try to network with people on LinkedIn, that's the first place that they're going to look at. If you just have your roles, like, I don't know, sales analyst at Kellogg's, what do they know about you?
That's right.
Nothing.
Yep. Yep. I
So
love it.
having those things, and also having, I think, recommendations on LinkedIn, because people want other people who have already been vouched for by other people. So if somebody just randomly approached me on LinkedIn, even previously, but now especially, they're like, hey, you want to work on this thing together, or you want to do this, you want to help me, I'll go look at their recommendations and be like, okay, seems like a solid person. Yep, let's do it.
Yeah, I
So
guess
have
it like
like five
consolidates.
connections. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Consolidates what they've built or what they've said about their profile. It shows that you can walk the
Yeah.
talk. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And this is another thing that I actually learned from Brandon. Brandon just stopped his role as director of talent acquisition at Talabat, but I met him one time when I worked at Michael Page, and I was like, "Why do you have so many LinkedIn recommendations?" And he was like, "So that other people can see that I'm amazing. It's not just to get more business, etc. It's also for my clients, it's for my candidates, so they could see that I'm a really solid person to work with and for."
Yep. Yep. I love it. Really great stuff. And I think though it's important from my perspective though that you don't just go to someone random and say, can
Yeah.
you write me a recommendation? Because at the end of the day, it's not true, of it, but it's important that it's your colleagues, your friends, people you've actually physically worked with, rather than
Yeah.
just, please write me a recommendation, ma'am.
No, it doesn't work. And it's the same with jobs, right? When people just come to you being like, hi, ma'am, can you help me find a job? Like, even though that's literally what I'm helping people do right now, I'm just like, no, you tell me what you do, what you need help with, like, go on my website, read everything, and then
Yeah.
come to me.
Yep, yep. I feel that maybe it's out of, maybe I don't think desperation is probably the right word, because it's probably a little bit strong, but people, you wouldn't just walk up to someone at a networking event and say, hi Trisha, I need a job.
Yeah,
No, you build a relationship, you ask the questions, you
100%.
create the interpersonal, you
Mhm.
implement the interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
I think people get stuck because they're behind the keyboard, behind the laptop, and they can just fire off something, and then it's not meaningful.
Exactly. It's such a spray and pray method, which is why I always tell people, when you're starting your job search, be very, very intentional. Make a list of like 5 to 10 companies, see the roles that they have, and start networking with people over there. And sooner or later, there's going to be a role that opens up for you, and they're going to be like, this is the first person that I thought of.
Yep, I love it. We have the same strategies, even though that we haven't jumped on a call before. Yep, Absolutely. And I think it's important when the job market's so saturated to
Mhm.
be focused, because if
Yeah,
you're just using your one CV or, two CVs, for example, for 100
yeah,
different applications, you're going to get lost. Whereas if you're focused and you,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, and when I tell people to kind of tailor their CV for each role, they're like, how am I meant to have so many different CVs? So I tell them, no, have one master doc that is like your main CV. And then when you see a role, because each role is so different, like even within, let's say, talent acquisition, each role is so different. Some roles just want you to work more on the sourcing, some roles want you to work more on the interviewing, some roles are more negotiation, some is just end to end. So take those bits and just have those in there.
yep, absolutely. I love it. And then this can also support you with the ATS, but it can also, ensure that you are focused within that specific sector. So you could have one, say, marketing, trade marketing, and brand management, for
Mhm.
example. And then that's when you just use those CVs accordingly, rather than one marketing resume.
Sure, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. I would just also like to cover some insights from perhaps recruiters or unicorn candidates. What is your experience with that? And maybe you could walk through the term unicorn, because perhaps in the
Unicorn
recruiting world,
candidate.
it's,
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
So I would say that a unicorn candidate is somebody who has every single skill and every single personality trait that the hiring manager wants. And a lot of the times, hiring managers come to recruiters with a huge laundry list of every single thing that they want, right? Like, I need somebody who has launched a product, somebody who grew the market share, somebody who's really charismatic, somebody who can know data analysis, somebody who worked at an agency before, and then somebody who did this and that and is also affordable. And I'm like, well, you can either have one or the other, right? And I guess sometimes if somebody is both, that's a unicorn candidate.
Yep.
So yeah, when I was recruiting for an essay before, I would have a lot of hiring managers who would come to me and be like, I want all of this, all of this. And I was like, well, they're not going to be within a salary band because having spoken to so many people who've done like very similar things, right? Because I was recruiting for like 10 different business units within Nestle, I knew what I was talking about. And they would be like, well, I still want them. So let's say I found one unicorn candidate like that. If we didn't move fast enough, that person would also be interviewing with like three or four other companies, and it would just be like, sorry, I've moved on. And then we would have to like up our offer, go to like the very end of the pay scale. And honestly, there were a couple of times that we even did that. They signed the contract and everything and still didn't show up on their first day.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. This is, yeah, not
still didn't
good.
show up on their first day.
Oops, that's a big oops. And so do you think that you're seeing that in the minute at the moment, perhaps with any of your clients that you're working with in the MENA region in terms of salaries? So from my perspective, and please, I would love to hear yours, I'm seeing a lot of jobs being posted, and then all of a sudden they're being put on hold. Are
Mhm.
you seeing any of that at the minute?
Yes, definitely seeing a lot of that because so many companies are restructuring right now, right? So they don't just want to lay people off and they don't just want to be like, okay, well, you can either move to this country where the cost of living is a lot lower. They're just making people within the company go into different roles. So, for example, if somebody is within supply chain, because supply chain is huge, right? So, if somebody is in like procurement, they're asking, okay, can you go to like order to cash or can you go into something else? So that's what's happening, and that's why they're just like, we don't want external candidates. In fact, just today I was talking with somebody, and they were interviewing for a role with Visa, and did really well, reached the last round of interviews, and then Visa was just like, "Hey, sorry, we're not accepting any external candidates because of the situation in Russia. So we're relocating somebody from Russia to Dubai. We need to prioritize internal candidates." So there's just so much that is outside of the candidate's control these days.
Yeah, it's really tough. I think it takes a hit because, obviously the candidate experience can be quite lengthy. And I guess it's not a mental, but it's a bit of a mind challenge to overcome that all of a sudden, that the opportunity has been shut down. So yeah, it's tough on candidates at the minute.
I know, it's really, really tough.
Yeah. So I guess in closing, how can people and what sort of support services do you offer either for perhaps clients in terms of the recruitment aspect or even job seekers and job searching strategies? How can people get a hold of you and what do you support?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I'm going to talk about the career coaching. So I also built my company called Aligned Careers, which has about 35 other mentors on the team because sometimes you don't just need to hear things from me, but also somebody who's like technically in that field right now. So if you work with Aligned, you can get help with everything from your resume to your LinkedIn interview prep, salary negotiation. And while I was doing this, I also realized that some people just don't know where they want to go with their job search. So at Aligned, we created about 3 different programs. One is called Get Focused. That's just for people to figure out, where do I want to go? One is called Get Interviews, as the name says. These are all the things that are going to help you get interviews. So we fully redo your LinkedIn, fully redo your resume, and then we teach you how to reach out to recruiters and hiring managers who are the right people. And then the last one is Get Offers. So this is a lot of interview prep. And I would say one of the interview preps is with me, the recruiter interview prep, and everything else is with the technical person. So if you're a financial analyst, you could be talking with like a head of finance, for example. And yeah, at the end, we help you negotiate your salary.
Amazing, fantastic. This is the full 360 candidate support. I
A
love it.
100%, because I've seen candidates kind of go wrong in all different areas. So I can help them with all of that. And how they can get a hold of me, they can either go on my website, aligned.careers, or they can just reach me on LinkedIn, which is where I would say I get most of the people coming to me from.
Perfect. I'll be sure to put your website and your LinkedIn profile in the comments below when I pop this up on my YouTube. Is there any final thoughts or comments in closing? Because I would love to thank you so very much for your time.
No, that was all. Thank you so much, Trisha.
Awesome. All right, then let's keep connected.
Okay, thank you. Oh.